Meeting of Monday, December 12th, 2016, 2 p.m. A disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none, I'll ask for somebody to move the recommendation to approve the minutes. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Veith. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. Reports of committees. We have one. Somebody want to move the reports? Councillor Burke, Councillor Henry. All those in favor? It's all of us. Consent motion, we have 7 items in there. Is everybody okay with leaving all 7? Anyone want removed? Seeing none, look for a mover on that. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Freeman. All those in favor? That's all of us. And now I'd like to take a moment to turn over to our CAO, Tim Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. And yes, this is a special moment. I wanted to take a moment and just highlight one of the reports in the consent agenda, and that is the overall responsible operator report. As Council may have read in the report, Mr. Garibaldi, who's in the audience, is wrapping up his career at the City of Waterloo. So he'll be retiring at the end of December after 31 and a half years serving the City of Waterloo. He's had a number of interesting roles across the city, many of which were in public works, but through them all, he's really had his touch on many facets of our operation. But probably one of the most unusual roles that he had at the city was filling in temporarily in our finance team as Director of Budgets and Financial Planning back in 2009. So Bill always had a spirit of saying yes, and we took advantage of that at many times. But Bill, as well, was an innovator for the city. He helped create the Center for Advancement of Trenchless Technology at the University of Waterloo. Still has his hands involved in that, and has been very active in the water industry throughout the years, and actually continues at this time in his role as president of the Ontario Waterworks Association. So we've really been served well by Bill over the years, and we just wanted to do a little shout out to him and congratulate him on a well-deserved retirement.
Congratulations, Bill. Next up, we move into more reports. The Stormwater Master Plan Funding Release, a report prepared by Jessica Kellerman. Does Council have any questions on that? Seeing none, would somebody like to move the motion? Councillor Henry, Councillor Freeman. All those in favor? Thank you. That's all of us save for Councillor Whaley, who's offering further congratulations. Next up, thank you very much for the report. Next up is the Uptown CIP Community Improvement Plan 2016 Annual Update Report, prepared by Carol and Brad. Do I have questions from Council on that? Councillor Durrell, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you for this report. I think it's filled in a lot of blanks. The idea of this program was to spur more business employment space in Uptown Waterloo. And so as I was going through the numbers, it's not quite what we were hoping, or at least in my, and I don't know how the rest of council feels, but it didn't quite hit the mark that I was hoping that we were going to hit with it. And so I'm just wondering if I can get a little bit of analysis from you over the last year, and I know you've made some recommendations, but how do we help get more people working in Uptown?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. As noted in the report, to your question about anticipated applications, and one of the things that we saw over the last couple of months is staff, and I think it was noted, we've met with about a dozen groups, and I'd say over the last 4 weeks, we've had leads of up to 4 to 8, and that's why the big push for 2017 is to do this call out to the community. It was the first year of the program, and at least I've heard through the business community is that they've been waiting for the street to be reopened. So that's why, for one, doing the structured round, we can solicit, do social media, what we need to, work with our partners like the BIA to ensure that all the businesses are aware of the program, ensuring that we hit all the key criteria so that we can deliver some great projects. I would say by including a deadline to the program, you'll find that when people know there's a deadline, they get their applications ready. So we just had actually 2 calls in the last 2 days. So our hopes is that with the way we've structured the program will not only help us administer the program in a better and more effective way, but we'll be able to reach some of those targets.
May I continue? So one of the striking details, I guess, in this report was the amount of heritage, and it looks like mostly front porches that were that used this grant, and I'm wondering if this shouldn't be its own grant, some sort of heritage grant, rather than having it within the CIP, which, you know, if I remember correctly, part of why we were so interested in the CIP is because this council chose not to go with a development charge reduction, hoping that the CIP and some of the other tools that we would have would be enough to entice employment land. And so when I look at this report and I see how many heritage, which is great, I just feel, I'm wondering, and I'm looking to council too on this, that to me isn't really what this CIP was for, is about employment in Uptown. And so whether we look at moving the grants apart or perhaps looking at something in the following years to so that we're really being very specific about what we want to see happen with the CIP. Were you surprised at the amount of heritage grants that came forward, and how much time does it take you to do that? Is your time being taken away from employment, working on those grants rather than you have to be working on the heritage grants as well?
I'll take that question. I wasn't surprised. I mean, I've worked in other municipalities where we have included heritage where possible, and the CIP that was approved by council last year specifically outlined the McGregor district to be included to support and encourage, where possible, heritage properties. What I will say with the numbers that have come in, I'd say that there is a suite of programs right now. We've had 12 applications. We hopefully will get more than double that next year. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to support those projects that do have heritage. But at this point, I will say that it's not a high number. It's great to see that those applicants came forward and did take advantage of a great program, but I'll say that there's enough variety and there's a diverse number of projects and that we'll see next year to address that. So as per the CIP, which is the deadline for the CIP is 4-year period, and as per our policy, that piece is included for all of our program, for our suite of programs.
So we can't change now?
That's correct, no.
Okay.
Unless we want to take, to revise the policy document.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Freeman, did you have your hand up earlier? Okay, Councillor Freeman, then Councillor Veith.
Just one of the things that stood out for me on this report was that we said we wanted to move to a deadline for grant applications, and I'm just wondering if we should consider having 2 intakes, because I would hate to miss out, as Councillor Gerald says, if there was like a new venue coming in or a new employer coming into the Uptown and they miss the first intake, that they lose out on being attractive to these dollars. And it might be helpful too for us to give broader examples in the intake on what we think are good uses of the dollars, if that makes sense. Because I think in addition to bringing jobs, it's about bringing people to the uptown as well, and so we're stimulating the economy. And I was trying to envision how some of the granting that we'd done already had achieved that, and I wasn't quite able to make the connections as solidly as I was hoping.
So through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Freeman, I think we can take that away and look at the option of doing two intakes. And if something did come forward, kind of not during the intake period, but there's a good opportunity, in terms of the funding capacity, we would have the ability to potentially expedite that. So we can look at a way of doing that. We wouldn't want to stand in the way of a solid application. And just as an additional follow-up to Councillor Durrell's question, the facade improvement grant, it's actually doubled for a 2-year period. So I think that's why we're seeing more up front, because if you do it within the first 2-year period, it kind of can double your benefit on the grant. So as that slows down, or that is back to the 50% grant, we might not see as many applications. Does that work, Councillor Freeman?
Councillor Veith.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, thank you. Just a comment. I thought it was rather telling that there were a lot of heritage grant applications for this, and that's something that the Heritage Committee talks about all the time, is having council implement some kind of tax relief for these kind of projects for heritage homes. So anyway, that's just my comment, and interesting data.
Thank you. Further comments or questions of staff? Seeing none, I actually did a walkabout yesterday of the different properties, since they're all a walkable distance from City Hall here. And some of the porches are, you can see them in progress, and you can see the action happening at the former, I guess, 53 Bridgeport there. A lot of action happening on that site. So certainly a dozen good things going on in our community, supported by the CIP. Would somebody like to move the recommendations? Councillor Durrell, Councillor Veith, all those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Next up, Mr. Shane Turner with the adequate heat bylaw, and we have a presentation. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I'll be brief. Hopefully my throat will last. By way of background, our city enforcement staff on a very regular basis will respond to adequate heat complaints in residential dwellings. And in doing so, we use our property standards process, the existing bylaw provisions. And even though that bylaw is very useful in most building maintenance situations, there are times when a quicker resolution would be more favorable. And so as part of staff's ongoing exercise to identify processes where we can do better, we have identified this as a process that we can improve. So what we're proposing is to enact a standalone bylaw that will deal with adequate heat and remove that process from property standards. I want to be clear in saying that this doesn't represent a new area of jurisdiction. We're simply refining our current processes. And the key components of the bylaw are that it will increase staff's flexibility and range of options when trying to negotiate compliance. It may result in a reduction in the number of orders that we have to issue against landlords. It will recognize situations where a tenant is solely responsible for the provision of adequate heat in a rental dwelling and not the landlord's responsibility. But it will also continue to give staff the right tools to resolve the issue if our negotiation fails and we have to move more into a formal or more formalized enforcement process. As part of our research and development of this issue, we shared the proposal with the Waterloo Region Apartment Managers Association, as well as Waterloo Region Community Legal Services, which is an area advocacy group for tenants' rights. We did receive some feedback back from the Community Legal Services area, but we believe that we've been able to adequately respond to their concerns. Going forward, of course, we'll be in touch with both organizations as we move towards implementation in January. So that's my overview, Mayor Jaworski, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Questions from council? and while people think about that, just when I was looking at the bylaw, Shane, the way it's written in terms of enforcement, there's the potential for a first fine to be up to $5,000, but and that's up to $5,000 upon conviction in that. But in 7D, it mentions that in order to make sure that people listen and do something, there's a day-by-day fine. And it looks like the day-by-day fine is set out to be a, well, it says shall be $500. So I'm just wondering, does that mean that if somebody doesn't take action within 24 hours, they'd be subject to essentially a $500 additional fine per unit, or how does that work?
To you, Mayor Jaworski, with the continuing offense type of provisions, if we decide to implement a continuous or continuous offense fine, we'd only do it in situations where in extreme situations where we're having trouble getting compliance. That continuous fine of a certain dollar amount per day, certainly it's open for discussion, but it would be a tool that we would use to encourage the compliance. Very seldom would that situation ever be used, but it would be on top of the existing original fine.
Okay. And then with respect to just this year, so it's really turned cold over the past few days. It's going to turn colder over the next few days. Would your team have seen any calls of this nature so far this season?
Up for this winter season, up to today, I'm not aware of any calls that we've received.
Okay.
We also noted in trying to track the calls that for the previous years, because the complaint is part of the property standards process, it was logged as a property standards complaint, not necessarily specifically an adequate heat complaint. So I'm not able to provide year-by-year stats on the number of calls. I do know that we received them. Going forward, we will be tracking them specifically.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move it, Councillor Henry, Councillor Burke. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shane. Next up is the Columbia Street widening, which we're going to put to tonight because there's a delegation that would like to speak to it. And following that, we're on E, the Water Services Utility 2017 rates. We have a presentation by Todd Chapman and Michael Pugilis. I guess we'll have Todd. Is there a presentation, Todd, or are you just here for questions? Yeah, questions. Okay. Do people have questions on the water services rates based on the information provided? Sort of a last call. Maybe somebody wants to move them. Councillor Henry. Anybody else want to move them? Councillor Veith. Further discussion? All those in favor? Seeing none opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you for the short presentation. Are we done? We are? Well, what do you know? Oh, yeah, because we didn't have the Columbia one. Councillor Henry, moving to go and close? Moving to go and close. Anybody else want to go in closed session? Councillor Veith? All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you.